In 1957 became the first standard of liberation in Africa. John Stonewall, an officer from the CIA, narrated before classified documents that in headquarters of the CIA, everybody was in the lookout for what was happening. 9 months of the independence in December in 1957, the agents from the United States had turned in a very complete report to other intel offices where you can read the future of Ghana, the first African country to reach its freedom, will have a great impact on the evolution of Africa and those of that Western interests on the continent. CIA, 10 years later, the 10 other countries had already become independent, and it was very fundamental, Ghana's process, because it became support of political support, economical support, so that countries could have their freedom. And regarding their Western interests, the CIA was also right. Ghana, his extradited independence. This is our critical move for today. We will see the last facts, the last players who are part of this critical moves. On this Wednesday, Ghana celebrates 62 years of independence from the British Empire. After liberations in the sub-Saharan Africa, and inspired 17 nations of the continent that would break the colonial ties in the 60s. The first player this year was outside the capital city, Accra, and in the center of the country. The celebration has taken place in the Yumahama Stadium with the participation of officers and cultural activities. The president gave a few words during the ceremony.
I extend hearty congratulations to all Ghanaians.
I extend hearty congratulations to all Ghanaians from the capital of the North region. This is the day that we celebrate our collective energies and the sacrifices of our ancestors that has brought us to this joy. This is, our first leader said our words. Ghana, our beloved country, is free. We will forever defend our freedom, even with our last of our blood.
Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. We will defend that freedom with the last drop of our blood.
We will see now the geographic location of Ghana and the personalities of the country. Ghana, officially Republic of Ghana, country from the Western Africa, at the north and north with Burkina Faso, at the east with Togo, and south and the Atlantic Ocean, and the west with the Ivory Coast. Until its independence, it was a coast of gold because due to its European expeditions looking for this precious metal, especially from Portuguese, British, and Dutch, and Danish and Swedish and Prussians. They had received their name from the ancient empire of Ghana, where they, in 1874, it was part of the British colony, until 1957, when they got independence from the UK, and was the first country from the sub-Saharan Africa freed from the colonialization, and inspired many other struggles in the area. It has a total surface area of 238 square kilometers and 28.83 million inhabitants. Its capital is Accra with almost 2.5 million inhabitants. Politically, it serves as a semi-presidential republic. Languages are English, Berber, and English and Berber, plus 9 African African languages, so they can be used in educational areas. It has resources like process mineral industries, hydrocarbons, and precious metals. Second major producer of cocoa beans after Ivory Coast, and it has the second largest economy after Western Africa and South Africa. It is the second biggest economy in South Africa after Nigeria. It's a regional reference due to its PIB. And also GDP, 70% of the rural population lives with less than $1 per day. Ghana is part of the African European Union and also part of the United Commonwealth of Nations and the United Nations organizations and the commercial and other trade offices. The sites that I will show you now will have several galleries of the Commission celebrations today. 62 years of independence. We will show you the article that precedes the images that you are seeing right now is that the colorful images has marked the celebrations that we say first time it has been outside of its capital, Accra, and the executive branch has given this the explanation saying that it's part of a process of recognition of other cities that have also played important parts in their history. For example, right now, this city has conquered several illnesses. You have seen several offices and children participating in the celebrations. I will go now to rebellion.org. May 14, 2018, we will leave this. We'll go to this portal, and we see in this other article that you can see on the screen from the professor in global studies in Africa, and has written several books, and is part of the committee for Black Africa. And the next article. Kwame Nkrumah is the coup that turned back 50 years back at Ghana. He's saying that in his book, Dark Days in Ghana, it was the CIA that took him out of the power. Howard Ban, chief in Accra, who was the leader of the coup, and he was given the Intel Prize. And because the biggest prize was that he did not leave another document alive so that it could be linked to the CIA as responsible for the operation. In 1999, the United States declassified the Western plot to take down the man who, open quotes, was the biggest opposition character against their interests. With the UK, they financed the coup against Nkrumah, and the author says that this tragedy and Africa's tragedy was he came to power on the wrong side of history after the Cold War and during the confrontation between bipolar confrontation between Eastern and Western interests, and Nkrumah was sacrificed in the altar of chauvinism for the empires. Charles Kist Agade is the name of the author. From London, our correspondent Pablo Navarrete joins us so that he will give us more current information. Good day to all the viewers from Telesur. On March 6 this year, we have 62 years of Ghana's independence from the UK. It was, as you know, it was the first African country of having its independence in the continent, part of the British Empire with its Prime Minister, the Pan-African revolutionary and political Nkrumah, who's the philosopher who was the first president and prime minister. Now the links between UK and Ghana are still active with a close collaborations, so that the Prince Charles with his wife, they visited Ghana in November 2018 last year. And in the UK and in the last census in 2011, 150 100,000 people that were born in Ghana live currently in the UK. That's approximately 1.5% of the population. And from the UK population, it was 60,000 in 2001, and less than 1% of the UK population. So we do see as an important amount of active population as part of a African diaspora to the UK. As I mentioned already, there are the relations. There are strong ties between both countries, and youth and people in the cultural aspect and cultural panorama in Ghana. For example, Idris Elba, the British actor who's very recognized and well known, who could be the first black James Bond of the series. Also, after 62 years of independence, both countries still have close ties with important population from Ghana in the UK. Thank you, Pablo, for the data you have given us and what has happened from the since independence. As part of the operations of imperialism, maybe an independence from that was truncated because of history. There are some data that we want to offer you right now to give you an overview of the political performance of the country after the break. Ghana, an independence, an exemplary independence, but which was castrated. It gained its independence from the UK, isn't the first country from the African sub-Saharan continent. And after 1957, we can see the panorama. The first country in African the leader of this movement was a Pan-African leader, and he was a part of the liberation of the African countries. In 1949, he set up the party to look after the people, looking for a political and strong political structure, and it was the first prime minister in the colony. He opposed the constitution in 1951 and went to jail because of this. After popular protest against the UK Empire, in 1951 they celebrated the first elections in Ghana. Ganuman was the first president to win, and on February 12th the protests continued throughout the country until the independence. They achieved independence in 1957. The neo-colonialist interest until a pro-UK commanders took hold of the power, and when Abidjan, and they set up a parliamentary constitution in 1969. They transferred the power to in elections where he could not run again. In 1972, elections set up another coup that ran after the industrial plans of Ghana and took over for agricultural interest and reform, and a devalued currency, and several students, thousands of students in jail. In 1967, they had a new coup from the middle class, which ended up in 1968 and set up with the military regime of Akufo. In June 4 in 1979, Riley set up a coup against Akufo, and they set up new elections where the Nationalist Party won. We'll set up the new timeline with two portals. The Vanguardia is first of these portals. Basic data and evolutions of Ghana. We see the setup, that is the highlighted information of, and we see that the importations came into sort of strikes that set up a second coup in December in 1981. In 1992, they set up new constitutions, and they had a new setup for presidential elections with with 53% of elections. In 1993, Ghana set up a new policy, new setup, and they had a civil regime. In 1996, he won again. In Kufur, he set up against the against the governmental party. He was the first government after 20 years of from Robles. We will go now to another portal. Some hours ago was this article was published, was uploaded. Ghana, from political independence to economical colonization, and there's a subtitle said that the current political situation in 2017 was part of the right patriotic country party, which was this role in history was a part of opposition against independence and Pan-African tendencies of the continent that we from his campaign, Akufo-Addo promised to break with the economic independence, but his message is ambiguous because inequality continues to grow, while in rural areas living less than $1 a day. The president has decided to broaden the governmental functionaries. The functionaries receive 3,000 euros, cars, and personal protections, along with their charges. This is part of the article, and this analysis, of course, at this time from Venezuela. We will see Miguel Jaimes, doctor of geopolitical and international affairs. So, welcoming you, Miguel, and saying what is the historic data that we're offering here? Did it inspire other liberation processes? But it seems that its tendencies were castrated. For us, it's very important to analyze and to study the independence of several regions of the African continent. From that region of more than 30 million square kilometers, more than 54 countries, 1.2 billion inhabitants, and among that geopolitical map, we do see the Republic of Ghana. We must take into account that for the African countries, it has been very complicated, their development, due to its enormous influence and the pressure applied from many decades of repression on the side of African countries. We must remember that from the exclusion from after the First World War, after it was excluded in 1918, and afterwards, in the Second World War, the supposed victorious countries of they broke Africa into parts, benefiting them, and Africa paid the consequences of their independence. And among that, the Republic of Ghana. Among those is the Republic of Ghana. It's a geographical space. Their influence, their geopolitical influences that Ghana has had with their neighbors, even though it has a coast, and other regions in Africa, they do not have a coastal, and their economic development is even more sorrowful. But the countries that are around Ghana, they have had great poverty issues and military issues. So, Miguel, I would like to quote an article that from our recommendations, or a fragment that we made as a recommendation, and is from Kizadade. And Trump wanted to industrialize Ghana, and it was a part of the plan until the United States and the UK, with their own declassified documents, and after they used some soldiers that had their own interest, and they set up a coup on February 1966, that took the country back in their development, not only for Ghana, but in the rest of the African. If he could have carried out his plan, Ghana would be the Malaysia of the west coast of Africa, and those that laugh at Ghana, they would not be able to have. I insist this is part of the story of the author. So, do you think this is the same imperialistic move that they always have from going back to the document from the CIA when they had the independence from Ghana at the time. So yes, for Africa, the solution has been much more complicated than for Ghana. First of all, the influence from the imperialism, European imperialism, and also because of the influence that the CIA has had and the Department of State from the United States on any intention, project, or of nationalism. Remember the great massacres and persecutions, torture and murder that they had set up against any actors that represented the Pan-African interests. And they, for example, also from the north in Libya, we know already the situation that has taken place there, and also the persecution against other countries in the same other in the countries, for example, like Algeria and Angola, and also Nigeria, or also Gabon, who's also under going into the OPEP, because they have huge numbers of resources, gold, diamond, timber, tropical forests that are still virgin, and also they have the luck that the West have made these countries of a rich reserves of hydrocarbons. When you see the west and the north coast of the African continent, they go to the east without any interruption of the United States to the port. For us, for the progressive sectors of the world, we do mention the South-South encounter. Africa is the South, and they have the combination during the exchange which should be the countries from the South. They have a historical geopolitical history of the countries from between the North and the South, but the North is not only the United States and imperialism, but also the North of the European countries where they broke these nations and they back torture, weapons sales, and they did the most atrocious crimes against humanity and the populations of the African populations. Thank you very much, Miguel, for your time and your participation. We will see you soon. This is the data in our mapping. The second biggest producer for cacao beans in the world, second producer of the continent, of gold producer in the country, and there's still a lot of inequality in the country. Can we talk about our first independence and a second liberation that is necessary that hasn't still taken place? We would have to see in what is the regional relation between other countries and extra regional, for example, other potencies like China and Russia, and also the UK. We will see this after the break. We will be back. Ghana, independence and a modern independence, but was it truncated? That is our move today. The geopolitical importance in the continent, and because of these resources and independence, we do find other keys and other clues for its analysis. They found important resources of oil in 91,000 barrels a day. And you'll have the problem is the constant in Africa. Multinationals dominate the market, and they keep the biggest margin and have more fiscal advantages. Gold has also the second exportation numbers. Ashanti, North, West, and Brunei. For those multinationals are exploit exploit these resources, and we're talking about communities that are being affected. They had to subsist outside of the country. The IMF also advised to open up the market to the Ghana, and they had the 1986 law that generated more income, but without more development for everybody else. They are part of the importance of Africa due to its civilization. However, they do have great influence from China, and it's their main business partner and social economical partner, and they have the Venezuelan country has also tightened their link with the country. And in July, the international chancellor went over there to negotiate the visas and the countries. And also with Russia, they had new agreements with the Russian multinationals for like liquefied gas. In 2017, Alexander Medvedev also was there. We will analyze these critical moves regarding Ghana, also with the participation the professor and from Congo, and who's director of the Investigation Council, and also as the Central of African Knowledge in Africa and in Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome you, and thank you for your presence here, Reinaldo. So as we were saying here, this is a very nice subject because Ghana is the genesis of independence and liberation in sub-Saharan Africa. Let us begin there. Yes, Ghana is the first step, a pragmatic and ideological step. They have their independence, a Pacific independence, but behind this, there's a number of men and women. The leader being Krum, and who was part of the Ashanti, the mother queen that fought against the UK, the British soldiers. So he is the main protagonist in Africa because mainly he's one of the most important thinkers of the world regarding politics. Nkrumah is one of the most important persons for the African socialists, and when he is prime minister, when he was a great prime minister, but he did not want to be just prime minister. He wanted an independent country. Nkrumah adopted African socialist, so he was a civilian, and he was adopted the socialist, anti-imperialist African and Pan-African movement to defend themselves against external interference. If we want to be an independent republic, all of us need to be independent republics so we can take care of each other. So it's a parallel with Bolivar. We need to take care of our interests against other powers. Nkrumah, unfortunately, he set up the African Council for African states. Unfortunately, in 1966, when he was visiting communist China, he is deposed, and he dies suddenly from a throat cancer. So it was not a throat cancer. It was a cancer of betrayal. Nkrumah was deposed, and Ghana will go have 30 years of dictatorship, and maybe civilians and militaries from Ghana that were mainly backed by UK more than the United States, mainly by the UK and by other powers. We're talking about European Western powers, France, because Nkrumah had turned Ghana into a center of regional encounters. Mandela was there, Niger was there, and these other participants. They gathered in Accra to prepare the conspiracy that will lead to the independence of their own countries. Nkrumah was a man from the left. He was a progressive man. So it was better to take him down, take him out of the countries too, and also from a country that was already a leader with their own resources like cacao beans and other oil, and who has a coast. So our correspondent Pablo Navarrete was saying at the beginning that the links with the UK are still strong. And they're very tight. The relations are very close and tight. And Ghana is part of the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth, so we can see a key here, a clue here. What is their relation right now with the UK? Regarding federal terms, the ex-colonies or the ex-territories have important relations with these powers. So France has their alliance with their own 20 colonies, ex-colonies, Portuguese with these 8 other Portuguese-speaking countries, and of course the Commonwealth, more than 40 nations. And most of them have a chief of state that have that consider Queen Elizabeth as their chief of state. So these they always look up to their old metropolis, to where they can live. They were mostly to study also, and this is also very dangerous because if you study in put in the power that invaded you, you will acquire their thought. Nkrumah, for example, he studied in the United States and in the UK, but he took the studies as tools for liberation. And he had very important links with the multinational companies in Ghana from the UK, regarding especially in the economic areas. Ghana was also very different from other countries, from the Western African countries that have currency as a franc, the African franc. Ghana has another currency. Liberia and Nigeria, they have they were part of the UK colonies. So, for example, Shell, which is British, participates in Ghana's economy, and Ghana does not have a lot of oil resources, but does refine oil from Nigeria, Cameroon, and Gabon, and has industrialized in that sense, and that's why Ghana was the second potency, economic growth in the world, and also in the cacao markets. In 2010, they got together between presidents, and they had the proposal, the mixed industrial of the process for chocolate, but it did not take place because there's something important here, Lucia. Ghana is going through a very difficult moment at the moment, and a president right now who visited Venezuela in 2009, he died on his duty, on his second presidential duty, because of throat cancer, just like Nkrumah. And also, they were both Social Democrats, and he was very differential for Nkrumah. Brownlee, he's part of the party, or he founds the party that and unfortunately this party breaks in 2016 and is divided, and he loses the presidency. And Ghana, we see important changes in economy, politics, and right now the presidency, the party is from the right, and we see something that is important to rescue from the African nations. The African nations, even though they're right, they hold nationalism in them, because this African nationalism beyond the political tendencies make African countries are different right from the rest of the world. For example, Ghana now has an international foreign policy very similar to other countries in the African continent. They respect international law, and of course, they would like to see a distribution of riches in Ghana, and we need to have policies and politicians that will handle this. This would explain the inequality that we're saying that they need policies that will want to close the gap, but we do intuit that the presence of multinational entities there that exploit the resources in Ghana will have an influence on those policies. Is this true? Can you shed some light on this? Yes. Yes, Ghana has a flourishing economy. Somebody was saying that the macroeconomic indicators even though they're good, the microeconomic indicators are not necessarily good. So we're talking about inequality of resources, and so yes, the riches is not trickling down to all the areas. So yes, Ghana I have been in Ghana a couple of times, and there's a growth. There's important growth in the structures, in infrastructure, communications infrastructures, airports, and such. And there's also some big pockets of poverty where the distribution has not licked down because the transnationals are voracious and greedy. And normally, what we see in the country, in this case Ghana, that the income is not distributed equally, and the multinationals take over home more than 80% of the income. So they leave nothing back on the to the country. So why is this happening? Because when a country cannot have a investment on itself with their own income, their hands are tied, because if they have independence with this, they can invest from the money from the cocoa beans, which is their second producers in the world. They could have the money, the income from the refining of the oil, and also from gold. If they could have the income, they could invest to at least of equality conditions. The poverty in Ghana would become less, because you see in Ghana a very different process than in the rest of Western Africa. Ghana and Nigeria are the biggest economies in Africa. So we do. So the hypothesis that we set up here, we see that independence that became a model, but then we're talking about a truncated independence that set its economy back. Yes, so the policies that from Adam Miller who died suddenly from a throat cancer, suddenly, and so something happened. I think it went to Washington, and something happened. If his policies had been set up for the economy and a distribution of wealth in the country, Ghana would be down another path. But we have to go down those policies, apply those policies, and of course, a legal framework that is very audacious, that Ghana can take back its income and its resources, and with strength negotiate their own against multinationals. So we can see, maybe we can ask for a 50-50 benefit. So that is necessary, because even though sometimes it's radical, the countries that we have have multinationals in their territories, they cannot take them out, because they have their economy would plummet, and they need to. We're talking about consensus about 100 years, so it had to be a negotiated process to get back their own resources and their own income. So Ghana is part of it's a model of a democracy. Why? Because of its stability, and Raul, who gives back the presidency in 2000. There's been alternations in the processes. 8 years. There hasn't been any more coups. Ghana has an important presence in the African community. So there's an analysis there that West likes peace, that favors their interests. So maybe in Ghana, if in Ghana there was more strength on their side, and we hope that this is so. And there's an interesting movement now, and there's an idea. The Nkrumah's ideas are being reborn. We hope that Ghana can raise its voice internally and say that yes, we're a democracy, a model democracy, but we also want to be a protagonic and participative democracy for the rest of Africa. Maybe an important key from the interest from the interest with the West, and the interest with the international potencies. So yes, Ghana has good relations with the external potency powers. They have good negotiations. They have trade with China, United States, and Europe as such, but still holds an alliance, very national alliance, very regional alliance with the African countries. Ghana is one of the leaders in African communities, and they can continue their life as country, and you can also say that Ghana can tighten the screws regarding on their own interests. So of course, Ghana, there's at least there are some difficulties where you have the distribution of power, such you have. What do you mean? So when you have what you're talking about, the political administration, these realms that we're talking about, real powers. I did so in 50 years of Ghana. I saw the powers there. 12 kingdoms. They were the kingdoms. They have kings and they have their own kingdoms there. Then they have head, but with the presidency, and all of these kings. One of these kings has to be the president. So this is a complication culturally, and this is another situation with the African countries. The elections of these presidents were they had in the 70s after the socialist African socialist, and it's part of the cultural links of to these countries. So what about the anti-imperial socialist country as you were describing, and is recognized, and the Nkrumah's idea is still recognized, and I'm asking this because the narration of the article that we recommended, we understand that after the coup, there's a sort of campaign to take down the independence of Ghana, and especially of this man. So Nkrumah had a campaign, for example, negative campaign like Chavez and Bolivar, to break them apart from the society in Africa and Ghana itself. When I was in Ghana in 2007, in the 50 years, I could see that the president at the time had a leaning. The current president at the time had a social democrat leaning, and the Ghana people were setting aside Ghana's legacy. In 2008, the new president in power, they tried to secure Nkrumah as a person who was a leader, who was an influencer. When I was together with the young people in Africa, in Ivory Coast, New Guinea, in Ghana, and in Mali, and very proudly they're studying Nkrumah, and I invite people to study Nkrumah. And he's a philosopher, and he has more than 8 books, all regarding how to govern on the governance of spirituality of a human being, especially on unity. I remember the words. I remember reading his words, the first words that said, Ghana is free, and now Africa will also be free because the black man has learned to govern themselves. 3 phrases, but one is nationalist, second regionalist, and the third humanist. And that goes against discrimination as such. He's a thinker, well known. In our last work, Africa has we have a chapter directed to Nkrumah's thought as a great free thinker. Geopolitically, is it important? But it's not threatening directly Western interests. Could we have this as a conclusion? Yes. Effectively, yes. Ghana, their peace is very convenient, but it's just like everybody is concerned about the peace, so everybody's concerned about the Gabon's president, but the powers are very interested that there's peace in Gabon, so that things be quiet in Ghana. So we're talking about a theory in a necessary conflict, where we need to necessary conflict to birth that which has not formed yet. Chavez used to say this. How do you see what will happen, what will take place in 2019 in Africa? Because there are important challenges, election challenges, especially with 10 election processes in Africa. Yes, we have Senegal elections. We had Nigeria, and the same president was elected again. Algeria is coming up. and also there's a fourth re-election in elections in South Africa. So we will see since it is an election year for the continent, this is very positive because this continent has always had lots of coups historically, and Africa has to have a good time of peace, of active peace, and to have a new reconfiguration. So until 2005, from 2000 to 2005, they had active peace in Africa. The coups were over, and Africa began to bloom again, and economic growth in Africa went over the media. And afterwards, we had coup in Mauritania and Madagascar and other Western African countries, Niger. For example, we had coups again. Why are coups coming back? To try and stop countries from consolidating and have great unions, like what Africa longs for, because this will always benefit Western powers. Because when you're weak politically, then they take over their resources. For example, what happened with the Congo Congolese Republic. They're always in trouble, and the corporations, multinationals, and the government to take away their resources. So these democratic processes, with all that this entails, we can have active peace with that. Thank you very much for your participation, Reynaldo. So we bid farewell to our guest and we'll go to our conclusions. In the Southwest Republic of Ghana, in Kramfou, there's a mausoleum to set up for Nkrumah. We see there's an epitaph that says, I have the certainty that death will not extinguish the flame that I have lighted in Africa and Ghana. After my death, this flame will be a light guiding the rest of the world. This legacy of the father of the African forefather, and of course Ghana, then independence model, and a center, a meeting place for other leaders of Africa and its regions, at the beginning of the 60s, an origin of that powerful idea of the great Africa still active and alive and still being built. It's the first step ideologically with its Pacific independence, yes, currently affected by the multinational participation, which has created great inequality in the countries. It has a coast, it has Atlantic, it has gold, cacao, and hydrocarbons. But we see there that it's not in part of the view of the empire. So this is the end of our critical moves. Goodbye.